Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome back to another video, and this one, again, is something that I haven't done on this channel, I don't think. Anyways, what I'm doing today is I am gonna tell you guys the best and worst thing about every brawler in Brawl Stars. And I had to get background footage for every brawler, which took forever, so I hope you guys enjoy this. Before we hop into it, you see it on screen, a lot of you guys are not subscribed. You should subscribe. Do it. Anyways, heading right into it with Shelly. I think that the best thing about her is just being able to chain supers over and over again when you're up close on someone. Doesn't even matter how much health they have. If you can get one super off, they're gonna die, because once you get one super off, you get another and another and another until they're dead. That's definitely the best thing about Shelly. And the worst thing about Shelly, honestly, is probably her star powers and gadgets. I think that overall, she might have like the worst star powers and gadgets in the entire game, like as a whole. And in a meta where star powers and gadgets are really important, having some of the worst of both is not very good. So that's definitely the worst thing about Shelly, especially gadgets. Her star powers are okay, but the gadgets are just terrible. Moving on to Nita, and I think the best thing about her is just how like consistent her damage is for the most part. Sometimes when you see a Nita, you might think, oh, she's not gonna do any damage, but then she 3-shots you, or maybe even 2-shots you at some points, like if you're tick or something. She does pretty good damage, and overall I think that she's just a really well balanced brawler. I think she's like in the exact middle of balancing, and yeah, that's a good thing about Nita. Basically, she is the definition of a balanced brawler in my eyes. And the bad thing about Nita is when her bear just follows somebody and doesn't swipe at them, because it's very slightly slower than every brawler in the game. That's the most annoying thing that could ever happen to you when you're playing Nita. It's terrible. Moving on to Colt, and the best thing about him is how much damage you can deal if you hit every shot. Like if you're a good Colt player and you can just read everybody's movements, you can either like 1-shot or 2-shot a lot of brawlers. And that leads me to the bad thing about Colt, is that if you don't spend so much time practicing and you don't read them perfectly, or the enemy is just really good at dodging his shots, you're gonna do no damage and you're probably gonna die. You're probably just gonna be completely useless and at most hit like 1 of the 6 bullets. Next we have Bull, and honestly, I think the best thing about him is just his insane amount of sustain. Like before star powers and gadgets were a thing, he didn't have much sustain at all, just besides having a good amount of health, but now he has a shield and he has a heal that he can use whenever he wants to. And if you get the shield and the heal at the same time, that's just a lot of sustain. Like as a whole, he has a ton of sustain, and it's honestly really hard to kill him. The only time you can like really easily kill a Bull is if he just lets you do it. But moving on to the bad thing about Bull is his range, and just being able to get in the first place in certain situations. Like if the enemy knows you're coming, there's basically nothing you can do, especially if you don't have your super. And even if you do have your super, if you don't have the right gadget, you're just gonna super right past them, or they can see your super coming and just avoid you. So as a whole, I think approaching is probably the worst thing about him. Next up we have Jessie, and the best thing about her is when you can just trap somebody in between you and the turret, and if that happens, they're probably dead, because they can't kill both of you. They either have to kill you or the turret, and either way they're gonna die, so that's all that matters. But the bad thing about Jessie is when her turret just doesn't hit its shots. This happens so often where the turret is shooting at someone and just doesn't hit a single shot just because they're walking slightly to the side. Even if someone is standing completely still, if they're at like the medium range of the turret, it could miss like half of the shots if they're not even moving. So I think that's definitely the worst thing about Jessie. Next up we have Brock, and the best thing about him is just how consistent his damage is, and the fact that he can break walls, and overall he just has some of the best star powers and gadgets in the game, especially the gadgets. I think that both of his gadgets are just like insanely useful, and they both just equally have amazing uses, and I think that he has the best choices between both gadgets. Like you could use either gadget and you'll be fine. It's not like other brawlers where one gadget is way worse than the other. And the worst thing about Brock is the fact that he has rocket number 4 as a star power when Max has that as a passive ability. That's definitely the worst part about Brock. And next up we have Dynamike, and the best thing about him is when you just get to absolutely outplay your opponent, read every single one of their movements, hit every single shot. It makes you feel fantastic, and hitting your super on someone is probably one of the most satisfying things in the game, because most of the time they just die. Anyways, the worst thing about Dynamike is when you're lagging. Like if you're lagging, you you're useless. You might as well just close the game because there's literally no way to hit somebody while you're lagging as Dynamike. Like as any other brawler, you can do maybe okay, but with Dynamike, you have to read the read because you already have a delay on the shots, but then you just have extended delay because of your internet. It's not good. So next up we have Bo, and I think he is just like overall really safe because, you know, he has his mines to block off an entire part of the map, and then he also has a star power which lets him see all over the place. And overall, especially in like showdown, you can just be safe as him because most of the time you'll see somebody and they won't even know that you see them, and you know, they'll be waiting for you, but you're like, oh no, I see you, I'm aware. But the worst thing about Bo is probably hitting his shots. Honestly, I think he has like the hardest shots to hit in the entire game. Like hitting all 3 of his shots is kind of rare, especially if the enemy is trying to dodge you. At most you might hit 2, but if they really let you hit them, then you can hit all 3. And moving on to Tick, I couldn't think of anything like in specific to say about him, but as a whole, just how safe he is for the most part is insane. He doesn't have like sprout level safety, but he has a gadget that keeps him completely safe. He has a ton of range. He has complete area denial. He has a super as a shield and insane damage. And as a whole, he's pretty safe. But moving on to his downside is if somebody does get up on you and you don't have a gadget or you whiff the gadget, you're gonna die because he has like no health. So the worst thing about him is that he can die super easily. He gets 2-shotted by basically everyone in the game. And sometimes he can get 1-shotted, which is so cool. And now we have 8-bit, and the best thing about him is obviously his insane amount of damage that he can deal. If you hit every shot, you just could 1-shot somebody. It's really similar to Colt, except I feel like his shots are a bit easier to land just because they're spread out a bit more. But at the same time, if you have perfect aim, that could make it miss a bit easier, especially if the person you're shooting has like a smaller hitbox or if they move like slightly to the side. But overall, you know, his entire thing is about dealing damage, and although he's tanky, I feel like the best thing about him is his damage. However, the worst thing about 8-bit is the fact that he is insanely slow. He's just slower than every brawler in the game by a landslide. He does have things to make up for that, like the teleport and his star power, but as a whole, those things are temporary, and when you start a match, you are insanely slow, and it's sad. Next up, we have Ems. I think the best part about her is comboing your gadget into like 3 shots that just obliterates anybody in the game. Like, sure, she does good damage as a whole, but when you get the combo, it's great because they just die. They immediately explode. And if they don't die, then you get your super and you can just hold them there and they're just helpless. Like, what are they gonna do? Nothing. They die. That's it. That combo is broken. The worst thing about Ems is when you don't have the gadget, or because the range is tiny and you miss, you're screwed because they can just run up to you and kill you. And a lot of the time they're pretty close to you, and then you press the gadget, but it just doesn't push them at all because they missed by like a pixel. That's the worst thing about Ems. And now we have Stu, which is one of my personal favorite brawlers, and the best thing about him is how he's basically better Mortis. I feel like that's just what he is. Like, the thing about Mortis is that he needs to use his ammo to get up to people, and then he has to use more ammo that he just doesn't have to kill them. But Stu already does good damage. He has decent range, good movement speed, I think, and his super is the dash, and he gets it very frequently, just about as frequent as a Mortis would get his dash because it's basically a second auto attack. And as a whole, the best thing about Stu is that he's just technically on paper a better version of Mortis. And honestly, I can't think of anything that like really stands out as bad about Stu, but I guess one thing is he doesn't really have that much sustain. You know, he has the healing star power that makes his dash worse, and he doesn't have any type of shield, but as a whole, he doesn't have anything that's like terrible. I guess the fact that his super just doesn't really do much damage can be a bad thing, but his basic attack already does a ton of damage. I really don't know. Next we have El Primo, and this is the opposite effect where I can't really think of anything that's good about El Primo. I think he's just a really bad brawler, but I guess a good thing about him, when you can super on someone, which is a rare occurrence. I honestly can't think of anything that's like better about El Primo than any other brawler in the game. I guess he's tanky, but he doesn't have any type of shield. He doesn't have any type of like burst movement speed to get up to people. So I guess I'll just list the worst things about him. His range is terrible. He can't really get up to people unless he gets his super, which is hard enough in the first place because you can't get up to people without it unless they let you get up to them. And people can dodge his shots super easily. If he starts an attack and they just walk to the side or walk through him, they probably won't take much damage at all. If you guys know something that makes El Primo like better than any other brawler in his league, then let me know in the comment section. And next up we have Barley, and the best thing about him is when you can just like walk away from someone or walk behind a wall and use his huge splash radius to hit them over and over again until they die. He doesn't have any like big features that makes him stand out compared to any other brawler, but that's the best I could get with him. So the worst thing about him is that he kind of struggles to win like in your face 1v1s. So the best thing about Poco is obviously his insane healing. He has this super which is an insane heal. He has a gadget and a star power. He heals like crazy. even to himself. Even if he's in solos, he can still heal a lot. And if he's being attacked, he can maybe even get like 2 or 3 supers in one fight because he just heals so much. And the worst thing about Poco is obviously his damage. He does, I think, the worst damage in the game at this point. And even if you have the star power that does damage with his super, it's still only like 800 damage or something pretty low like that. And yeah, if someone were to like rush up on him, he's probably dead. Next, we have Rosa, and the best thing about her is the fact that she just has so much sustain with her super, and also she can control the map in a bunch of different ways depending on which gadget she chooses. If she chooses one where she can place bushes, then she can, you know, place bushes for her to camp in, for her to pop out of and just run people down. And also she has complete map control with her gadget that makes the bushes all poisoned, which is broken. So overall, I think the best part about her is her super and her gadgets. They just go together really well. And honestly, there isn't anything like terrible about Rosa. The only bad thing I can really find is her range, but her range is actually pretty good for short range brawlers. But you know, there can be points where she is like barely out of range and then she dies because of it, but I feel like that's hardly even an issue for her. Next up we have Rico, and the best thing about him is the fact that he can technically be a thrower if he really wants to with his bounce shots. The only issue there is that you have to have a massive brain to make that actually work. And the downside with Rico is that if you don't have a massive brain and you don't play him that frequently, you're just gonna completely forget that he can bounce shots in the first place, and you're not gonna do very well because he just does so much better when he can actually bounce the shots. So next up we have Daryl, and the best thing about him is the fact that his super automatically charges. Unlike El Primo, this is amazing, and obviously that's perfect for him because he gets a super, he rushes someone and gets it back instantly with like 1 or 2 shots. He gets it completely back, and at that point he can just chain supers over and over again. But the worst thing about Daryl is when your aiming says you'll go somewhere, but then you just bounce off a wall even though it did not say you would hit the wall. That's the worst thing that ever happens when you're playing Daryl. Next we have Penny, and the best thing about her honestly is her splash. If someone is directly behind someone else and they have no idea you're there, they're gonna get obliterated. It doesn't even matter, like if they're behind a box or behind a person, she hits them, the person behind that is gonna explode. I think the worst thing about her is when she's completely alone and she doesn't have her super. There's no way for her to like heal herself, give herself a shield or anything like that. Most of the time in 1v1s where she doesn't have the mortar, she's gonna lose like instantly. Next we have Carl, and the best thing about him is that he essentially has infinite ammo, and if you're smart then you can hit a wall with it to make your attack speed even better. And as a whole, having infinite ammo in that way could be really good. And the worst thing about Carl is his first gadget, the one that places fire. That thing is completely useless, and I'm so surprised that it's still in the game and they haven't replaced it with anything else because it's just not good. The best thing about Jacky is that she is a tank that can run super fast and just can't die because she has so much health, especially if you have the star power that reduces damage. Most of the time, if you're smart when playing Jacky, you can just avoid death by all costs, just by dodging people and healing up just like 2,000 health. You're chilling. You're completely fine. Like, it's so hard to die as Jacky. And the worst thing about Jacky by far is her super, because most of the time they can act before you can after you super, and it does no damage to them or anything like that. It just pulls them in, but it's just a bad super. It's honestly better to not use it most of the time. And now we have Piper, and the best thing about her is when you equip ambush and you one-shot people, because that just, it feels so good. When they're at full health, you hit them once and they just disappear. The worst thing about her by far is when you don't have a super and you don't have any gadgets that you can use to help get away, and you are useless. You do like 700 damage up close, and that's like nothing. All 3 shots would barely even tickle any brawler in the game, and you're literally just done for. There's absolutely nothing you can do. If someone comes up to you and you don't have any escape tools, you might as well just close the game. And for the final brawler of the video, we have Pam. The best thing about her, in my opinion, is the fact that she is just so well-rounded as a whole. She does good damage. Her super can do damage if you want it to. She heals a ton. She has good range. She has good like spread with her attack. As a whole, I think that she's like one of the most well-rounded brawlers in the game, and she can be taken into like most modes, I feel like, maybe besides like heist, but even then she could be good. But the worst thing about her is when her shots just feel inconsistent. You line it up perfectly in the middle of someone, and then some of the shots just go right past them, and you do like 800 damage just because the spray pattern is not in your favor. Anyways, that's gonna do it for the video. If you guys enjoyed it, then leave a like on it, and if you're new, then subscribe, because I have to make a part 2. I did the first 23 brawlers, and this video is already extremely long, so I'm gonna do part 2 soon enough if you guys enjoy it. So if you want to see part 2, then let me know in the comment section, and let me know by leaving a like on the video. Anyways, though, with all that being said, I'll see you later, and have a good night, guys.